Batman has been among the most adopted comic book characters for film out of any publisher within the United States of America. But adopting a character as in-depth as Batman can have unique problems associated with this. These are facts that only relate to the Batman films. These facts are not mentioned at all within Batman comics. Due to the complexity of the films made for the character, these interesting yet completely true facts are only for the Batman movies. Joel Schumacher was the director for the two notorious Batman films in the mid to late 1990s that were known for being nothing like the comic source material that they were supposedly adapting, and killing off the film franchise until Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale, and David S. Goyer helped to revive the film franchise almost 10 years later in the early 2000s. What's a completely bizarre and real fact is that the films were received so negatively by movie audiences and film critics is that his reputation as a director were completely destroyed by these two films and everything related to them. After Batman Forever was released in 1995, though at the time it made modest ticket sales and profits, there were a fair amount of controversy over the decisions that Schumacher did during the directing of the film, and the facts that he changed plenty of aspects and origins and even appearances of characters from the films, from how Tim Burton with his interpretation of the characters and related properties in the late 1980s and early 1990s. However, even after all that Schumacher did, there were still those who were neutral about Schumacher and his method of directing, as well as his interpretation of the Batman characters. It wasn't until after Batman and Robin was released in 1998 that viewers have had enough of his so-called visions and ideas for the portrayals of these characters. Batman Forever was a flamboyant film and known for its excesses. But it's now a fact that Schumacher did even more outlandish and tasteless antics for the characters in Batman and Robin. After the film's release and dismal performance for Batman and Robin, any future films were cancelled, and Schumacher is now known as the worst director to have ever been associated with the Batman film franchise, or anything related to Batman in terms of film or television. But his humiliation didn't stop there. For years after the franchise ended, he was ridiculed by people within the film industry and fans of the Batman comics for what he had did to the characters. Even during and after the Nolan-Bale films of the early to mid-2000s, Schumacher was still ridiculed for what he had done in the mid to late 1990s. It was hard for him to find work as a director because he had been typecasted as being the flamboyant director from those Batman films, Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. In 2017, more than 20 years after he had first directed Batman Forever and later Batman and Robin, Schumacher publicly apologized yet again for what he had done in the 1990s. It had gone to the point where some were actually sorry for him, and online discussions had it that he had apologized enough for what had happened a generation before, and that he should be left alone now. It just shows that those two films were and still are regarded as the worst comic book adaptations of any superhero or any related characters ever made. For any casual movie watcher who saw Tim Burton's adaptation of Batman in 1989, or the sequel Batman Returns in 1992, or watched these films without knowing any of the comic book lore behind the films, for Bruce's childhood and his parents' death, this was an extraordinarily confusing fact that they had assumed to be true. Within the Batman comics, the person who had actually killed Bruce's parents was originally a simple story that became more complex as the decades progressed from simple origins. The Golden Age origin in 1939 had a nameless bloke shoot and murder the Waynes over a failed attempted robbery. The story became more complex, with the murderer being named within the comics as Joe Chill in 1948. Further additions to the murderer had him being from a random person to being a mid-level crime figure in Gotham City's underworld. Before the modern revival of DC Comics in the mid to late 1980s, Bruce got his revenge against Joe Chill for the murder of his parents all those decades ago. The fact that a young child such as Bruce had to witness the deaths of his parents in person became the crucial reason he decided to take the cape and cowl of being Batman, to help make sure that such things never happen to others again. And the fact that originally the person who killed the Waynes was just a nameless person. No rhyme or reason for that fact. Crime can be as cold and ruthless and random as that. Even adding to this thought is that once Bruce had gotten his revenge against Chill and avenged his parents' murder, the focal reason for him being Batman is now gone. He later retired from being Batman before his eventual death in Bronze Age comics. In modern Batman comics, the aspect of Bruce's parents being murdered by an unknown criminal is once again prevalent because that adds to his reasons for being Batman. If the culprit that murdered his parents is ever found and brought to justice, there would not necessarily be a meaning or reason for his crime fighting. It would be possibly irrelevant, that's why it's unknown. With all of this in-depth history for the reasons of Bruce becoming Batman, it would be almost impossible to put most of it or any of it into a Batman film. Which is why the aspect of Joe Chill has never been discussed in any real Batman film adaptation. But there was one time a film attempted to do this. In 1989, Tim Burton's Batman identified the villain as a younger Jack Napier, the man who would eventually become the Joker in the film. Originally, the script had Joe Chill from the comics as the perpetrator of the crime, but the script changed, and the end result being the Joker whom did this act. This simple mistake confused an entire generation of casual movie audiences whom did not necessarily know the comic facts, and though it would later be corrected in future films of an anonymous person who did the act, it's an infamous decision script-wise from the late 1980s that stuck with plenty of viewers and fans of Batman. With the so-called presidency of Donald Trump, online commentators have remarked with The Dark Knight Rises, Christopher Nolan predicted such a political outcome years before it actually happened. The online theory goes like this. In The Dark Knight Rises, Christopher Nolan filmed his vision for a final version of a Batman film. Throughout most of the film, the streets of the city, being Gotham, are barren and empty. This is a reference to political decisions that are made and have an impact on a population of a said country. The city isn't allowed to thrive or continue to grow, as this was the case before Trump became the President of the United States. Under Barack Obama, the United States was actually repairing itself from the damage done during the years of George Bush. The film was released in 2012, and during the same time roughly, Barack Obama was about to launch a big bid to be re-elected as the President of the United States through elections. A major plot focus in the film, and according to the theory, is that it's the changing of the guard and transitioning from one government to the next, or progression through life, or through governance. More with the theory here has it that in The Dark Knight, James Gordon is made commissioner of the Gotham Police Force, and though there's a rough start to his method of protection by the police, stability and peace is brought to Gotham. According to the Fox, in the film, this is a period of 8 years, Within America, if a president is elected for 2 terms, then this is the period of time that they would be within power. Nolan is saying that the work of one person elected to save the day or protect the people can be easily undone by an unpopular successor, as this is the case in the American method of modern government. Bane, according to the theory, is the successor to Gordon. He becomes the ruler of Gotham City after taking it by force, which is a reference to Trump attaining the presidency but not having the popular vote. The fact is that the majority of the country voted for Clinton, but Trump got the vote by the outdated and some say unfair electoral college system. Further is that prior to Bane taking Gotham, much like Trump taking the presidency at the time, he planned this for a long time beforehand and no one took him seriously. Bane's populist rise to power is too forceful and too quick for anyone of rational thought to oppose him and easily brushes aside any resistance. Throughout the film, Gordon is hospitalized and Batman is trapped in another location. This might be a reference to Obama's service time is up as president, and he can't do anything about it, being Batman, and John McCain's medical condition at the time and eventual death as another possible reference, as he was a Republican who was fiercely against Trump and often voted with the Democratic Party against him. With these references, with Batman being Obama and McCain being Gordon, both of them are gone. There is no one to stop Trump. There is no one to stop Bane. Gordon and Batman are unable to stop Bane from taking over Gotham City. Once Bane is in power of the city, he immediately abolishes the social hierarchy of the city, claiming it would be better for all of the citizens within it. The correlation here is that once Trump was in power, he claimed that he would give the country back to the people, but quickly attempted to change or destroy various aspects of society. Controlling all methods of communication within the city, Bane often speaks of freedom, the leader who is looking out for those who can't defend themselves. Trump claimed that he would give the government back to the people, or restrict it heavily, as Bane in the film redistributed the wealth, claiming it would be for the people, as it was too appealing to ignore or think much about. Bane desires to create a fairer world by destroying the corrupt Gotham elite. Bane's the outsider who decided to shake things up and stop those in power from abusing it. Even is going as far as mentioning and comparing Bane's accent or speech pattern to Trump's somewhat childish comprehensional use of the English language's grammar when using Twitter during the so-called presidency. Though Bane, much like Trump, was later revealed to be a fraud, working for certain aspects of the corporate businesses that lied to the average people into believing that he would fix their problems, the theory shows that the scene where Bane forces some of the upper class to walk across a frozen river to certain death has religious interpretations as well. It also speaks about Bane having no problems using needless violence to advance the corporate agenda, as the innocent people whom died during his presidency, from the Puerto Ricans affected by Hurricane Maria to Americans affected by the attempts to repeal Obamacare. The theory concludes that in all dictatorships, no matter how cruel or unjust or corrupt, there is always some sort of gleaming hope that things will get better. Batman and Gordon return to help retake Gotham. Though Obama and McCain are gone, others will take their places. Much like how America is, Gotham is the same. Americans, much like Gotham citizens, must put their faith in one another and the government to oppose an unqualified maniac. The theory was first put online in January of 2017, and at the time it had those who considered it, but in general, overall, the theory was not given serious thought until a short time later, Donald Trump's inauguration speech was oddly similar, if not exactly the same, in certain lines from The Dark Knight Rises. There have been many examples of what he had said when compared to the speech from the film. Apparently, after the speech was put online and people actually compared it to the film, more information was later released that Donald Trump was actually a fan of The Dark Knight Rises, even going as far as posting a review of the film on his own YouTube channel, and mentions its use of Trump's tower in the film, which was good for his business. Others even went further than this, taking apart his entire speech, and even those supposedly made claims that other parts of his speech were taken from other films. People have commented if such clear references to film is plagiarism, but in most accounts plagiarism has to do with the exact phrase, not necessarily the phrase with certain words removed or changed. Even if there were accounts of intellectual theft by Trump, no one wanted to take him to court or use legal rights over such minuscule reasons, but online commentators mention that it was a serious lack of integrity to copy lines and paste them into a speech rather than write a completely original one to announce and broadcast to Americans. When it was announced that Heath Ledger was going to play as the Joker in The Dark Knight in 2008, plenty were excited to see a fresh new take on such an iconic adversary of Batman. Little did anyone know at the time to whom the extent Ledger would take on the persona of the Joker, and to how far he would immerse himself within the character of his own creation. It should be known that most modern actors try to immerse themselves within their roles as much as possible so he or she can be more faithfully and more convincingly show an audience that their acting is real and more serious. Heath Ledger was one of those actors who literally became the character that they were playing, as the real-life person became the fake persona. When Heath Ledger suddenly died right before the film was released, American and Australian news sources commented that he had accidentally died from an overdose of pills that the actor had been taking to help him sleep, and that he was having a hard time recovering from the role that he had undertaken. Jack Nicholson, the man who had played the Joker in the prior Batman film of 1980, the character, commented to the media that he also had problems adjusting to regular life once the film was finished and the role was done. But when news finally emerged about how exactly Ledger immersed himself within his role, astonished both the American and Australian media and public of both nations. A German documentary released a number of years after his death, Heath Ledger, Too Young to Die, presented new information about the exact circumstances leading to his death, and information discussed among German, American, and Australian media sources. His father, Kim Ledger, revealed that his son kept a diary in which Heath used while preparing for and filming through the Joker's role in The Dark Knight. Some actors or actresses would either keep diaries or make records of their thoughts while in character, to anchor themselves mentally to their actual personality and not to be completely immersed by the character of their own creation. It's a basic acting technique and rule used within the theater industry. Information presented showed that Ledger locked himself away in a hotel room for a month, supposedly, before filming actually started, and experimented with voices for the character. Ledger took inspiration from Malcolm McDowell's character of Alex Delarge from the British-American film A Clockwork Orange, directed by Stanley Kubrick. This was another character that was known for being extraordinarily intensive in terms of acting and presentation on film, and it was no wonder how Ledger used this character as the basis for his portrayal of the Joker. Ledger's Joker laugh was actually inspired by the so-called laughs that hyenas make. But the laughs that the animals make are not actually laughs, so Ledger's laughs was slightly different from a normal person's laugh, and could easily and eerily catch people's attention when heard. The hospital scene, which was partially improvised by Ledger and also had inspiration as well, His sister mentioned that they used to play dress up as children, and Ledger often wore a female nurse's uniform. Cutting out Batman comic book panels of the Joker and pasting them within his journal, Ledger also read up on the character and imagined what the Joker would like. What would the Joker want to do to innocent people, and how the Joker would want to kill the Batman. Plenty of what was written within the diary was very morbid yet perfectly in character. There was even an excerpt from when Ledger himself at times applied the visual makeup to give the Joker character that he had held in his mind a physical appearance that he had created and given life to. The 8 months ago wrapped up now might give a meaning to the makeup of being an outward visual manifestation of his Joker character. On the last day of Ledger on set as the Joker, he wrote a cryptic goodbye message on the last page of his journal. It was haunting, graphic, and intense, as members of his family and friends had later commented after looking at that particular page. From an interview all the way back in November of 2007, prior to The Dark Knight, Ledger had commented publicly that the role of the Joker was intensive and he was just not getting enough rest for himself and to work on set with his future projects. These symptoms continued throughout the year and into January of 2008, when he was apparently diagnosed and suffering from some sort of repository illness. This, combined with his intense method of acting and working on set, took too much out of him. And on the 22nd of January 2008, Heath Ledger was found dead at 3:36 p.m. Eastern Standard Time within the United States of America. After his death, and due to his fans both from Australia and America, and his status as a well-known actor, a federal investigation within the American government released information that, due in part to his role of the Joker, he was prescribed a lethal combination of medication for pain, insomnia, anxiety, as well as common cold medication. Doctors later mentioned that if Ledger had not taken so many medicational doses all at once on that particular day for his rest between act and shooting of his films, that it might not necessarily have killed him. After The Dark Knight's release, Ledger received international fame for his role in the astonishing performance that he had acted and portrayed during the film. It's been said that Ledger might have been the most skilled actor of his generation, and his performance of the Joker might have been the greatest villain role for a comic book film adaptation ever recorded. Visually, Gotham City appeared dark and foreboding in the films. Very modern and very industrialized, but not in an advanced progression, but more of a decayed and tired method of advancement. This is how it looked visually, and that was how the impression was supposed to be presented to viewers. The gray and dark scenery were everywhere, shown everywhere, depicted everywhere in the films. And the architecture of the city gave hints to German expressionism. Though the film took place in the late 1980s, the style of buildings within Gotham City were easily from the 1920s or 1930s Art Deco. And the ironic beauty of these buildings are seen easily over the more modern buildings built alongside them or on top of them or even within them of the post-Second World War Gotham City landscape. Even particular panels during scenes of the films were inspired directly between Burton and his tribute to Fritz Lang. The scene of Shrek's toy store is similar to the Tower of Babel from the Metropolis film. In Batman Returns, the original character of Max Schreck is actually taken from the name of the German actor in the iconic film of Nosferatu. Though Christopher Walken's character of Max Schreck is named for Nosferatu, the visual appearance is more similar to Rotwang, played by Rudolf Klein-Rogge. In Batman, when Jack Nicholson's character of Jack Napier was escaping from police in the Axis chemical plant, to try and increase his chances of escaping, he starts throwing giant levers at a huge panel of dials and switches. It's also been said that this was a reference to a scene in Metropolis where the workers are operating the huge levers of the M machine. Even further in depth, Byrne had his Batman Returns having a set of statues pulling giant levers, which were clear but discreet references to the M machine levers. Within Metropolis, there's a character only known as the Thin Man, who wears all black attire and has a distinctive hat. Within Batman, Jack Napier, before becoming the Joker, who was created as a result of events, the mobster Jack Napier wore similar clothing and a hat. Even a scene of him behind a newspaper like in Metropolis. Both films have their climaxes within a cathedral. Visually, Byrne had his very similar design to the one long used during the filming of Metropolis. Though if viewers really thought about it, and some actually did, the cathedral in Batman is absolutely gigantic, enormous, titanic, and foreboding. Towering over all of Gotham City, nothing is even close to its height. Some have viewed it as a reference to Metropolis's influence on cinema in general, as countless countries and directors have been directly inspired by Fritz Lang's masterpiece of a film. The opening scene from Batman Returns has the Cobblepot Mansion in focus. Notice how the initial for the family's name is atop of the gate. It's a reference to another iconic film of Citizen Kane. However, the difference is with Citizen Kane, the first mention is of a death, but for Batman Returns, the first mention is of a birth. Further speculation had it that the moment when the Penguin is born, in the film a silhouette is shown of a person and a baby bassinet. References have been made to Rosemary's Baby, as in both films that's all that has been seen of the children, as well as hearing the reactions of the surprised, disgusted, or shocked parents. With his parents abandoning him into the Gotham City sewers, it's been said that this scene was a reference to the Bible as well as within the book of Exodus, where Moses' family sent him down the Nile River in a basket when he was an infant. Similar with Oswald's parents and his bassinet along the Gotham Park. Once again, there's an opposite result. Where Moses' parents were trying to save their son, Oswald's parents were trying to kill him. One particular shot, which many have missed due to it being in the background, is a gang member setting fire to a toy display in a shop. Among the burning toys are some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles merchandise, which might have been seen as an advertisement for the brand. Another influence on the Penguin was the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, as the depictions and appearances of Caligari and the Penguin are seen in both makeup application and costume design, even supposedly in the waddling method of walk that both men use. During the day, they show respect and promote being prominent citizens to the people, but at night command lackeys and blokes to do their bidding. A scene not normally noticed was with the Penguin in the graveyard, as one of the tombstones actually moves slightly when the Penguin brushes aside it. Though some have just said that it's a harmless stage prop, others have made clear references to Plan 9 from Outer Space, in which fake graveyard tombstones are often moved and even fell over during a scene with the actors. The rooftop fight scene between Batman and Catwoman are an almost identical scene-for-scene reference to Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, as the climbing rooftop and encounter scenes are almost exactly familiar when compared picture to picture, moment to moment. The scene with Selina and Bruce have been also mentioned to have multiple references, as during the date, Bruce mentions Norman Bates and Ted Bundy, both being serial killers. But Norman Bates was a fictional villain from the film once again by Alfred Hitchcock being Psycho, And the difference with this is that Ted Bundy was a real-life killer that committed crimes in the 1970s. With the pair on the couch, it's also a very specific reference to a scene in the film Cut People, where Bruce tries to become closer to Selina for possible intimacy. But like the main characters of Cut People, Selina is too afraid to become physically or emotionally connected to Bruce because of what might happen to Selina if her fragile mind was to experience sexual arousal or even desire. The death of the Ice Princess with relation to Vertigo is another reference explaining as in both films a man and woman conspire against the hero by taking captive a female hostage, bringing her to the top of a building. There the main villain throws the woman off the building to her death, while the male hero watches but is sadly unable to do anything about it. As well, in both films, the female co-conspirator is horrified by the male villain's act of murder, and in both films, the male hero is blamed for the innocent woman's death.